Welcome to the chat on Newsday Amarillo and News Channel 10-2. I'm David Lovejoy.
And I'm still Chuckalicious, Chuck Williams.
And welcome Miss Amy Presley and Miss Madison Fowler. They have a podcast out. It's concerning young men. You can't help but think about this now with kids being active with trick-or-treating, getting ready to go out and have fun. And whenever I see this young man's picture behind me, Dorien Thomas, it leaves an ache in your heart because you just want to know. They put out a podcast about this case and some of the things and the mysteries that shrouded around it, some unanswered questions, and I guess Amy Madison, let's be honest, those questions won't be answered until we find out what happened to Dorien.
Right.
The podcast you really wanted to focus on what happened in this process, what happened after Dorien, and some of the issues before the child went missing. Elaborate a little bit on that for us.
Well, first of all, yesterday was actually the 25th anniversary of the day that Dorien went missing back in 1998. And we kind of aligned this podcast with being released. The final episode would be released on the day that he disappeared because I knew everybody would be talking about it. And we want this information to be spread around as much as possible because somebody does know something. This we know, at least one person. And yeah, it's been interesting trying to research for something like this because it is a cold case. It is from 1998. We're talking kind of that pre-internet, kind of early internet days, but there's not a lot of information. We don't have a lot of television archives to go back to. So there's just not a lot out there. So, a lot of the information we garnered was through talking to family members, talking to the Amarillo Police Department, and just compiling what we could find.
One of the things that stands out about this case is how it ties to other things and other things that happen in the community. And I don't think people who on the surface who just heard about this missing child know some of those elements.
Right.
Can you tell us a couple that really make a big difference in this case that you think were extenuating circumstances or things that tied in that we didn't connect?
Go ahead, Madison.
Okay, I was like, Amy. So in August of 1997, Dorien and a few of his friends actually found the body of a local Amarillo woman, Gloria Covington, behind the YMCA in North Heights. And then a few weeks later, another Amarillo woman by the name of Linda Jackson was found murdered. And then I can't remember on the timeline, Amy, when the third victim who actually survived ran to Dorien's apartment complex after being assaulted and bloodied and everything. And then not long after, I think maybe, is whenever Dorien went missing. So many different pieces to this puzzle.
Has anybody ever thought that maybe, just maybe, Dorien went missing by choice? Has that been looked into?
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things. He was 9 years old.
Right.
He rode his bicycle everywhere, and that's kind of what Dorien was known for. He was the kid on his bike. But APD made a good point. I think when you're 9 years old, maybe a month tops, you're going to be gone. That's such a young age. And I think there's only so far he could have gone. So I think if he would have been closer to a teenager, I think that would have been more of a possibility. But being so young, I don't know if that holds water for me.
Well,
Go ahead. Matt.
Oh, I was going to just say, the family actually waited 24 hours after Dorien went missing because they thought maybe he had stayed over at somebody's house because he actually had done that before, got in a whole lot of trouble. But they, thought, well, maybe in the off chance he's just doing that again and he's going to get in trouble again. And then he just did not come home. So
in these type of cases, normally the first place they look is close to home, inside the family, inside those four walls. And from the investigation that we've seen and that we've heard, and like I said, to the layperson, we're not privy to a lot of information in a police investigation. But that family was vetted. They investigated that angle pretty thoroughly, didn't they?
Yeah, well, that was the first place they go, obviously, is the home. And then start from there. So anybody within the family circle, that's where they're going to start. And yes, I think that got exhausted pretty quickly. So but there's still doubt within the community about the family. So we explore that within the podcast of unfortunately Dorian's mom. There's been a lot of public doubt towards her for years.
Yes.
So, and we explore, does she know anything? Could she know anything? I don't know. So, but we do talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Dorien had siblings, right?
Yes, he has two other brothers.
And how has this affected them moving forward? How has because it's got to be an ache. It's got to be a longing and an ache, and just I couldn't imagine the pain of a brother or sister, something like this. How has it affected them in their adult life moving forward?
Well, I think. Oh, go ahead, Madison.
Well, I was just gonna say that it finally, I think Brandon said that it finally hit him that his brother wasn't coming home when he was a freshman in high school. That he was just sitting in class and it just, I guess, just like a wave of emotion came over him. And I don't remember if he went home right after that or exactly what happened, but he was just like, my brother's never coming home. Amy and I have not had the opportunity to talk to his oldest brother. That is something that we would, love to do. But so far, we've only talked to Brandon. And so that was his take on it, is that he also mentioned that his mom, there were a lot of people who said, oh, I know what it's like to lose a son. I know what it's like to lose a child. And she lost a lot of friends along the way because she said, you know where your child is. Yeah. Your child, you can go visit your child at the cemetery. I don't know where my son is. It's not the same.
That has to be a shaking thought in itself. Hey, yeah. I know where mine is. Do you know where yours is? Whoa, that is.
Yeah. Amy, this was you wanted to coincide with the disappearance of the child, the last podcast, but you have another part coming out, another piece, a follow-up piece on this.
Yeah, so next week we decided to do a Q&A with our listeners. We've had a lot of questions come in about things that maybe we weren't as clear about as we thought, or people have other theories that they have based now that they have more information. So we're going to do a Q&A episode with Madison, myself, and Juan, who is our sound designer. And we just kind of break down each one of those questions.
Where can they find this podcast? And if they have questions, or better yet, if you know something, if you've seen anything, if you remember and recall, how can they reach out? How can they contact you guys?
So the best way to watch or to listen to the podcast, it is an audio podcast. So kind of like an audio documentary. It's available on Spotify. So if you have the Spotify app, if you have the Apple Podcast app, that is on your phone. If you are an Apple user, it's a little purple icon and it's called Podcast. And then we're also on YouTube now, and we're on Patreon. Patreon is where you can support us. So if you like what you hear, you want to get early access to episodes, you can join us there as well by searching What Happened to Dorien Thomas.
That's what a picture of him in his teenage years he would look like. He'd be a grown man now. Ladies, thank you for your hard work. Really important work.
Thank you for having us on.
Thank you so much for that. We appreciate you. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with more chat.